my name is Erica. I'm class of 92, and I have a book coming out hopefully late 2021. It's supposed to be August, um, called Black Panther Princess. First, let me just say, please donate to Morehouse Spelman. Obviously, I'm going to always pitch for Spelman or any HBCU during this homecoming pandemic. And also, I'm just glad that you guys figured out a way that we could all still connect. So I have an autobiography coming out next year. The publisher is Amistad Press, and the my editor is a Patrick Henry Bass, and HarperCollins is the publishing house. And I don't really have a lot of experience with writing in terms of novel or biography, but luckily for me, I kept all of my diaries from 14 to 24. I'm only missing like 2 years in the late 70s. So I don't yet have a book, but I'm glad you guys asked me to come and talk about it and talk about growing up in the Black Panther Party. Let me look at my little notes here. Okay, so I'm not sure, but I assume that a lot of people have a little bit of history on the Black Panther Party. It was a political organization that I considered to be my family. So there's probably a line that crosses in terms of how my book will be presented. And it's not a historical document. It's not an analysis of Black struggle in the United States. It's really the story of what happens if you've been told your whole life you were born for revolution and the revolution never comes. So a little bit of background about me. And I preface that I'm just a California girl. I was born in Los Angeles. I was raised in Oakland, and I then grew up in Beverly Hills. It won't probably surprise you, but my mother is Elaine Brown, and my father was a man named Raymond Masai Hewitt. My parents were both leading members of the Black Panther Party. They were both members of the Central Committee. And my mother, Elaine Brown, became the chairman of the Black Panther Party in 1974 when I was 4 years old. So I've had a lot of time to think about when people say, that's such an interesting story, this, to be the daughter of this woman and grow up in the Black Panther Party in this, what people think is misogynist, violent, thugs, things that I did not see or understand growing up. And if you look behind me, you'll see there's a picture. This is me. That's Geronimo next to me. So in the Black Panther Party, we lived communally. And that's one of the things that will probably resonate throughout my book is how I probably was still connected to that family. There were so many Black Panthers at my wedding in 1999 in Oakland that there was a police surveillance. So I'm going to read an excerpt from what I think will be the second chapter, but obviously a lot of it will change. And then if you guys have any questions, and then we can talk a little bit about the history of the party if you want to, in terms of how it might relate, because obviously you have one of the most brilliant writers in your class. But for someone like me who is just trying to tell a story, my editor has a lot of work cut out for his work is cut out for him because I tend to tell a story and ramble and go in tangents. It could be because I'm a Pisces, but I will go on and then come back to the point, but you kind of have to stay with me. So I'm not sure what will shake out when the editor, finally, when we get to the last draft. But this is just a little bit about when we left the Black Panther Party when I was almost 8 years old. And in the first chapter, I talk about, being raised in the party. And the first time I had Mexican food was on a farm with Cesar Chavez as we were making protest signs. The life that I led in the party was the life I assumed I'd always have. Especially if you're, 8 years old, there's just no other outside. And I had an understanding that people were against the party, but I believe they were wrong, because in the party we were raised in dormitories. So even though we all went to this Oakland Community School. If your parents were members of the Black Panther Party, you lived in dormitories. So during the week, I lived with 20 other children, maybe 10 girls, 10 boys, in a house that the party acquired. And so a lot of the kids in this picture behind me, we all lived together. So if you bathe together, sleep together, you're family. And then one night you move from Oakland to Los Angeles, which is a really, really quick flight, but it's a world away when you're, 8 years old. And I frequently went to LA to visit my grandmother, but the idea of just never coming back to Oakland and not seeing my family again. But when you're trying to be what you think is a little revolutionary, in that time, I wanted to be as easygoing as I could for my mom. I did understand that she had a lot of stress. So when she said we were leaving, I picked a couple of toys out and a favorite pair of bell bottoms and, tried not to make like a big deal about it. So this is a little bit from right after we moved to Los Angeles in the middle of the night. The life I knew was over in the 90-minute flight from takeoff in Oakland to touchdown in Los Angeles. I visited my grandmother in Los Angeles often, but I lived in Oakland. For a moment, when we exited the plane, we lived nowhere. It didn't matter to me because we were together. It was past my bedtime when we arrived at the hotel. I was so thrilled to be up late and on an adventure with my mommy. We stayed at the Bonaventure Hotel in downtown. Even nestled near other high-rises, it stood out to me. I thought it looked so futuristic with its clear pod-shaped glass elevators on the outside of the building. My grandmother met us at the hotel. She gave me some candy from her purse, as she often did. I set it aside while enjoying my room service burger and fries. Mom and Grandma talked in hushed tones, and I watched a movie on TV called Hit Lady. It was about a woman who was a retired assassin but must do one last job. Naturally, the target was a man she came to care for. It was pretty exciting to me. She had a job to do, but love got in the way. I think in the end, she didn't kill him. I was enthralled. For a moment, I thought I couldn't wait to tell Mai and Layla about this movie. I hardly noticed that Mom and Grandma were chatting up a storm between intermittent turns to smile at me like everything was okay. It was okay, wasn't it? After a night or two in the hotel, we moved on. For a short while, we stayed with my grandmother on Rossmore in Los Angeles. It was a small apartment, but I didn't care. I was happy not to have school or books or homework. I was shocked 2 weeks later when my mom informed me she'd enrolled me in a private school called Le Lycée Français de Los Angeles. Mom reminded me of what to say and not to say if people asked where we'd moved from. I understood in this case lying was good because she wasn't sure if people were looking for us. She told me softly that if someone wanted to hurt her, harming me would be the best way to do that, and so I must be mindful of what I say or reveal. I didn't know who might be looking for us or why. I figured whatever was happening was okay because we were together. I liked the idea of make-believe and having a secret that only Mom and I shared. I did not like the idea of going to a school where I'd have to wear a uniform. We wore uniforms in the Oakland Community School on occasion, but not every friggin' day. My mom praised my quick adjustment to our changing lives. I wanted so much to be perfect for her, I didn't consider my own sadness for leaving our family. Apparently, the lycée had a waiting list, but because Mom's friend Suzanne gave her Diana Ross's name to use as a reference, I would not have to wait. After a few days at my grandmother's Rossmore apartment, Mom tells me we're moving somewhere close to my new school. To our own place, I asked excitedly. No, she replied. Grandma is coming with us. Oh, I say, wondering why, for the love of God, we can't just be with each other, like on the courtship of Eddie's father, a show I watched, imagining me and my mother doing stuff. I love my grandmother and have so much fun with her, but I don't understand why she can't stay in her place. Mom needs Grandma's car and someone to help take care of me. She explains this to me as we're moving to Suzanne's house in Malibu. When she tells me this and gets no reaction, she says, Malibu is on the beach. We're going to live at the beach. The beach? I was so excited. I loved going to the beach in Alameda with Geronimo. We listened to the radio, built monuments to socialism in the sand, ate fried chicken, and played in the water. In the party, we started swimming as toddlers. Apparently, Black people swimming is revolutionary in some way. I didn't listen as it was explained because I just wanted to focus on going swimming. I loved the ocean, water, and swimming. Much later, it became clear to me that my mother is afraid of swimming, but she didn't want me to know so I wouldn't become afraid. My fearlessness about the water makes her happy. Starting school at the Lycée de Los Angeles in Pacific Palisades didn't make me happy, but it could have been worse. One of the private schools Mom considered was the Page School. Not only did it look super boring when we visited, but they held Saturday classes. Saturday school? No, I didn't want to go there. And their uniforms were jive. I was almost worried after the tour ended because Mommy couldn't stop praising Saturday school. When we got in Grandma's pea soup colored Datsun B210, my mother said, I love the idea of you being in classes on Saturday. There's no way you're going to that school. When the school tour guide told us that police regularly visited for good citizenship lessons to the children, that nailed the coffin in the Page School for Mom. I felt I dodged a Saturday school bullet. The Page School was off the short list. I'm not sure how I thought the major change in our lives would go, but my logic was if I didn't live in the dorms any longer, why would I have to go to school? Of course, that wasn't realistic, but a kid can dream. The school was beautiful. The fence had vines and flowers growing that reminded me of the fence draped foliage at the Oakland Community School. I wondered if Rona and Layla were playing behind that fence without me. The lycée seemed fine. There was no mention of Saturday school, and I liked Mrs. Cabaz, who owned the school with her husband. She had a deep, rich voice and thick accent that sounded glamorous to me, like a lower octave Zsa Zsa Gabor. She and Mom talked briefly. She asked how Miss Ross was doing, and then told us about the Pacific Palisades campus where I'd be enrolled. There was a question about which grade I would attend because we didn't have grades at OCS. Education was driven by aptitude in the Panther school. If you flourish in math, why sit bored in class based on age, not understanding? Also, kids had been ignored in their school before OCS, so at 14, they had the reading comprehension of an 8-year-old. I was so at math, but I loved language arts, and I guess it reflected in my pre-enrollment test. With the semester drawing to an end, I went into 3rd grade and started my class in Mrs. Noak's 3rd grade class. So I hope I didn't read that too fast, but my entire family, except for me, is from Philadelphia. And people from Philadelphia are like, no offense, 21st in York, North Philly. So what happened was I had all these diaries and people asking me about writing a book, and I really wasn't interested because shortly, in high school, I was sexually assaulted. I ended up using drugs. I was on cocaine for a dozen years. I came to Spelman with a cocaine problem. So I wasn't eager to write it, but because I had these diaries, and because Spelman and Morehouse are just such a wonderful connection, and I'm so grateful that my mom made me go. I'm pretty sure it saved my life. I reached out to a man named Nick Childs, who is a writer and an editor and an agent, but it's because he had written a book about Bobby Brown. He did the biography for Bobby Brown. And his sister is a friend of mine from Spelman. So I was like, I'll just see if this, I pitched the book before and never wanted to finish it. Not wanting to deal with, I don't want to embarrass the party. This is a girl who's frivolous, who ended up in Beverly Hills. I, for years, blamed myself for my rape. I didn't make any connection between the sexual assault and the drug use. So I just was like, eh. But then I was like, you know what? I'm still here. And a lot of the stories are funny. My mom wrote so many bad checks. She might as well have been Meadowlark Lemon. You could have just bounced them. I mean, that's the survivor's guide to being a Black single parent in America. And I mean, at some point I did meet my dad later, but that's the thing about the Black Panther Party is that they were my family. I mean, I have several brothers and sisters because of my dad, but the book really is about my family and how much I love my family. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. And Stephanie, hopefully you're keeping me on time.
Okay.
How did you end up at Spelman?
You have a whole hour, so you have until 11.
I have no idea what time it is. It's 7 a.m. for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have about 40 more minutes.
You're kidding. Okay. Okay. Since someone asked how did I end up at Spelman?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't have any interest in going to college. I was a terrible student at Beverly Hills High. I was suspended for graffiti. I was arrested. Yes, I was arrested. Well, in my mind, I was detained. Thankfully, Dr. Cole, I didn't have an arrest record. It's just that I was out in the park where George Michael was arrested for enjoying himself. And I was in the park at 15 with three white boys, one mohawk, one shaved head, maybe one with long blue hair. And it was midnight and we were playing. And in Beverly Hills, you don't do that. So when when the police came, they took us to the Beverly Hills police station that you see in the Eddie Murphy movies. And I was like, well, I'm not scared of the police. I'm scared of Elaine Brown. Like, I'll just sit here. They don't really, because it was Beverly Hills, they don't know who your parents might be. So it's not like you had a mugshot. They just took us to the jail and then they're like, we'll call your parents. And I was like, well, my mom's out of town. I just was like, I'll just sit here until the morning. I don't know, but I'm not calling her. And about 20 minutes after they got our information, the officer said to me, I'm going to take you to Los Angeles Juvenile County if I can't find your parents. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I definitely am not. So then I called my mom. And at the time, she still smoked. And so imagine the former head of the Black Panther Party. At the time, I was just scared because I was 15. But now I'm like, so the head of the Black Panther Party has to go into the Beverly Hills Police Department at 2 a.m. to pick up her daughter. And she was smoking a cigarette and she wouldn't ash. So it was all ash. Like she just looked at me like, I can't choke her in the police station. I just want to sign. So I could see her hand shaking. And I was grounded so long, people pretty much thought I changed schools. So that might have been my sophomore year. And then no, yeah. 1 year I crashed her car and then 1 year I was arrested. So by the time she read about Dr. Cole in Essence magazine, she was like, oh, you're going to go to Spelman. If they'll accept you with all of your transgressions, that's what you're going to go to Spelman. I'm going to figure this out. And I was like, well, I didn't really plan on going to college. I was just going to hang out and find myself and maybe spend a couple weeks in Europe. Because I'm in school with people who, most of the girls, a lot of the girls I went to school with before their 16th birthday, had some rhinoplasty. There were certain things that people thought were normal that I realize now are not normal. Like telling your mom your black mother, you're not going to college. Who is Elaine Brown? So she was like, yeah, no. I said, well, maybe I'll go to Santa Cruz because Huey went to Santa Cruz. And my mother said, you're not going to major in dope and white boys. You're going to Spelman. So she wrote to Dr. Cole and said, my daughter has made a lot of mistakes. All of the things I've done for the people in the struggle, I, kind of didn't parent. It's kind of hard to run a paramilitary organization and then someone's like, can you sew my slip? At some point when I was maybe 9 or 10, I had a torn slip and my mother said, oh, let me sew it for you. I'll fix it. And so she took my slip, she sat down and she sewed it. And then she called me to her and she said, Erica, I'm finished. And when she stood up, the slip was sewn to her skirt. I burst out laughing. She was in tears. But it's like my first birthday outside the park. She was not in town most of my birthdays in Oakland. So my first birthday outside the party, she read magazines to kind of get an idea. So when she saw this interview with Dr. Cole, she was like, oh, Spelman. I hate to say this, but at the time, California it's not that HBCUs weren't well known, but only one came to Beverly Hills High and it was Howard. And my mother had gone to a women's high school, girls high girl in Philadelphia. So when she read about Spelman, she was like, if they can just get past your suspension and arrest. And I wasn't really arrested. So, but she did tell Dr. Cole all of those things. And then Dr. Cole said, okay, we can still make room for her. And my mom just started crying. And then we had to figure out, my mom hadn't filed taxes for many years, so the idea of applying for student loans was not, I mean, it is what it is. So that's how I ended up at Spelman. And I don't know if you guys remember a woman named Mrs. McGinnis, but I'm pretty sure that I made her life like a nightmare my first freshman week because I wore the white dress and the black shoes, but my black shoes were patent leather combat boots, and my white dress may not have had foundation under it. So I like just wore a slip. And Mrs. McGinnis was like, no, we wear foundation. And I'd never heard that term. And I was like, I have on black shoes and a white dress. Like, I'm doing the best I can. I'm barely meeting the requirement. And then when she said something about pantyhose, I was like, we're done. I did my best. So that's how I ended up at Spelman. And the funny thing is, the book was originally going to end with me meeting Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, in 2003. It gave me a sense of how hard it is to be a parent and a revolutionary. Like being a parent is probably, I don't have kids. Being a parent is probably already hard. But, my mother was in North Korea when I started walking. She has no idea when my teeth came in, but she was also trying to change the world for all Black children, for all poor children, for all hungry children. The fact that there wasn't a food, breakfast program, half of the people that I meet when I'm in Oakland tell me some story about how they got a sickle cell test or, food, shoes. And even when we were little, we would go visit prisoners. So I would go to San Quentin with my mom when I was like 6 years old to visit a man named Johnny Spain. And San Quentin is a huge prison in the Bay Area. But what I saw was, oh, it's so pretty, it's right at the beach. Because kids don't know what they don't know. I didn't know why she had a bodyguard. So the idea of, she's saying, well, now you're going to go to Spelman and they're going to try to return some of the Black culture that Beverly Hills has sucked out of you, because she picked Beverly Hills because she wanted a good public school. I had been in private schools up until then. So, Spelman, it was just, she was like, there's a college built for Black women. And the fact that there are two, that Bennett and Spelman exist, tell me that HBCUs are the sword and shield of Black education.
I have a question.
Question.
Erica, is Samara. And I just want to tell you how proud I am of you. You guys just don't know her. Well, if you guys don't know, she has such a beautiful spirited energy. But I've always wondered how our parents were connected, because we met freshman year, you coming to my room, asking me who my dad was and saying your mom, our parents had spoken. And I never got from my dad what the connection was.
I think, did your dad had Motown connections?
No, he did not.
He didn't know Switch? I think.
No. But let me
ask you. I love the fact that our parents, you were so nice.
He never answers me. He never answered me when I asked him. Okay, so as a child, we were told when we came home from school, if we saw white men lingering around with suits, not to go in our house, like to go somewhere else. And to me, that was like normal. And then as I look back now as an adult, that's very not normal. So having parents that were both active some ways in social activism as children, how did you adjust realizing a lot of things that we were told back then weren't normal? How did you adjust and deal with that?
I mean, it's a good question. But first, I have to say, I'm so happy that you were so tolerant of this weird looking freshman with some really jacked up hair coming to your room and being like, hi, can I get, because my mom was like, and go talk to her. And then she'd seen your picture and she was like, she's very pretty. She seems very smart. She got into Spelman. So you need to know smart. Because my mom thought that I had some friends who were not smart in high school. A lot of the bad things we did were my idea. So she'd be like, well, who's the fool? The fool. I'd be like, it was me. I was in charge. I'm the head fool. One of the weird things, Samara, is when my mom said to me, when I was little and I would try to open the door first. One time I was, I lived with her on weekends. So my mother lived with a woman named Erica Huggins for a while, who I'm named after. And the kids in the party, we would stay with our parents Friday and Saturday night, and then maybe go back to the dorm on Sunday. And one day at home, I tried to open the door, and my mother's bodyguard put his hand on the door, Aaron, And she explained to me I couldn't go out first. And at the time I was like, well, because I'm a kid, like what? And then later on it was because if someone shoots the first thing that opens the door. But like I used to play on when the Panthers would rent homes, which now, of course, as an adult, I'm like, what a terrible thing to do to a rented property. But my father they'd rent a home and my father would break the floor in the ceiling, in the living room, and dig a 6-foot hole. Now, I don't know how you're going to get the property value back on that house when you move back in and find out you have a 6-foot trench. But that way he would have a place for people to hide, people to put guns. So they would fill sandbags to put around that trench, and then maybe they might put a piece of board over it. But my mother said I used to love to skip over the sandbags, like parkour, like some sort of, I don't know. But I also realized, like when you talk about how we realize something's not normal, that you don't call police pigs. Like I didn't know that was a bad term. I thought it was funny, and that I didn't realize it was offensive. But all of the Black Panther newspapers, every time Emory Douglas, who was the artist and cultural minister of culture, he would draw a pig in a police uniform. And when you're a kid, you're like, well, that's hilarious, because the other thing is in the party, at the school, they would show movies on Friday. So anyone could come, and the movie might be maybe 50 cents, and you could buy a little ball of popcorn wrapped in saran wrap for a nickel or something. But the movies that the party showed the children, that they showed us that weren't in theaters, would be like Billy Jack. And Billy Jack was some white guy who said he was Indian. I have no idea what those movies were about, but he went around kicking police in the face. And so that was good enough for the party. Like, and now we'll watch this. Or this movie called Alakazam the Great. Really strange, weird 3-hour Japanese anime, but apparently it has something to do with communism. We were raised Marxist-Leninist in the party, but if you asked us at this age what any of that meant, in my mind, I was like, I'm tired of sharing everything. Why do we have to share everything with everyone? But the other day I saw a picture online, and my mother was wearing a dress that I used to love, and I realized I'd seen it on every woman in the Central Committee except for Erica Huggins. So living communally was one of those things that I thought was normal until we left the party. So when my mother and I first lived alone together, like whatever would be normal, I got a lot of sense of normal from television, if that makes, So I saw a Christmas tree in like a store or something and said, oh, I want to have Christmas. And so my mom was like, okay. And my grandmother was happy. But for the most part, if I saw something on television, how normal people lived, then I would like want to mimic it. You know what I mean? Like it was like watching Halloween. I mean, like my costume was normal. Erica, we don't tell people where you came from. My father was a member of a group within the party called the Buddha Samurai. And they would be the people, like the worst things you think about the party, it's them. The people you don't want to come at your door, it's them. There was a woman in the party who was raped by a man who knew her. And he'd made the mistake. She didn't realize who it was when it was happening, but he'd made the mistake of calling her by her birth name, and she had chosen a different name when she joined the party. She chose an African name, like my father, who became Masai. And so when this woman, after she was assaulted, and she told other Panthers, and so Panthers were like, well, we don't allow, that to happen. And they found this guy, and they mud-holed him. If you don't know what mud hole is, you could just take it from the words, So, and then they gave him, I think, 48 hours to leave. So he had like a day to heal, but to just leave Oakland. So the first time something happened where my mother called the police, like later on when we lived in Beverly Hills, a drunk man came to our house by accident, and he was just drunk. I was so surprised because we would have never called the police. Mm-hmm. If something happened in the community, we call the party. I mean, people call Panthers. There are women who talk about it when my mom was running for election. If I need food, if I need anything, I call Panthers. So the normal thing to call the police, and especially now in this current climate where Black people are getting killed by the police, that idea of that normal reaction to call the police was something I had to get used to, if that makes any sense.
So Erica, we I have one question, then we've got a couple folks with their hands raised as well. My mom's also a graduate of Girls High, by the way.
Is she?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Please don't sing the song.
And no, so she went, I'm trying to think of what year she graduated.
My mom graduated in 61.
Okay.
I
want to say that she was 62. But yeah, North Philly. So anyway, but my question is about, there's an awareness that I had mostly after Spelman of, a lot of our classmates, a lot of our sisters and brothers whose parents were heavily involved in the movement, that I don't know how or why we didn't talk about it that much in school. But it's an awareness that I've had since graduating. And so I'm curious, it's great that Samara, you asked her question before me, because I was curious how much you knew about other kids whose parents were involved in the movement when you were in school.
It's funny because a lot of girls in my class didn't know anything about my family until I joined Facebook, or they were in like graduate programs. So my small circle of friends knew. And then I was also really lucky. My freshman week, my mother came to help me unpack at Howard Herald, ground floor. HH. And so this girl was walking up and down the hall, and she looked at us a couple times, but I didn't really think about it. And she said to my mom, "Oh, are you Elaine Brown?" And my mom, being from North Philly, was like, "Why?" And the girl said, "Because I'm Meadow." And Meadow was a girl who lived in the dorm with me that I grew up with. Her mother was our school nutritionist who would not let us eat anything fun. And Meadow was in Howard Herald. So the fact that we hadn't seen each other from 8 years old, because once people left the party, it happened like that. Like I left, and then a couple of people I stayed in touch with, my mom found them who were in LA, like girls I grew up with. But I hadn't seen Meadow since I was 8 years old. She didn't recognize me. I didn't recognize, but she recognized my mom. Mm-hmm. So as soon as she said, "I'm Meadow," my mom burst out in tears and was like, "Oh my God, Meadow's here." But then people kept asking me about this guy named Geronimo. And the weird thing is, in the party at a certain point, Geronimo was a popular name. We talked about AIM. The Black Panthers influenced the founding of AIM. The Black Panthers influenced the founding of the Brown Berets. They worked with Young Lord. So Geronimo, there were a couple of Geronimos. One was the person I lived with, this little boy right next to me. This is me. This is Geronimo. And then way over here is Mai Huggins, and I'm named for Mai's mother. So when people asked me about him, I was like, no, that Geronimo, we never met. His parents were from the Connecticut chapter. And also there were so many chapters within the party that there were a lot of people who didn't know each other. It's not like we had the internet. The Black Panther newspaper was the internet. But having Meadow there was it turned out to be crucial for me, because when my sophomore year started, a week before my sophomore year is when Huey Newton was assassinated on the streets of Oakland. And as weird as this sounds, while he was still alive, I thought that there was a chance our family would be reunited. And then all of that went away. But the fact that Meadow was there, like, I wanted to leave Spelman. I had no idea that was attached to it. But the good thing about Spelman is, while I was in school, I was sober. So then I was like, well, you can't. But it's just that in my head somewhere, I thought, as long as he's alive, we will become us. And something will happen that will tell me what I'm supposed to do next. Because in the party, you just assume that, like, I I told my mom I wanted to be an actress when I was 7. I loved Charlie's Angels, Jacqueline Smith. Oh my God. And when I said, yeah, I want to be an actress, my mother was like, what? No. I mean, I might as well have been talking to Jackie Kennedy when, JFK Jr. said he wanted to be an actor. She was like, no. So even when I started Spelman and I wanted to major in art, she was like, is art revolutionary? And I was like, it can't be. But I wasn't sure, you know what I mean? So I just wasn't sure. So knowing other people on campus who came from parents in the movement, it wasn't something like my mom, I think, said to me, yeah, you should go say hi to Fanone. His father, Crook, and I used to run guns between LA and San Diego. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I said hi, but, she also told me to go speak to El Amin because he was in West End at the time, H. Rat Brown. She was like, you go over there and you tell El Amin you're my child. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that either. I'm not going to do that. Like, just no. The only time I ever, and I hate to say this, but the only time I ever really embraced or talked about, like, this picture is the first time I've had anything in my apartment ever that would tell you I grew up in the Black Panther Party. And I moved back to LA a year and a half ago. But before that, I mean, you might, unless you recognize my mom, you probably not know. And even my freshman week, it was the beautiful and wonderful Adrienne C. Smith, who came into my room to show me her memory book. It was some word I hadn't heard, but it was like a bunch of pieces of cheerleading outfit and pictures and beautiful stuff. And, she was a beauty queen. So I took it as these Southern girls, they're all Whitleys. Like I had, I didn't have I had no preparation. I saw School Days 6 months before and I was like, okay, so at least there'll be parties. But Adrienne, I was like, this is a beauty queen. And she showing me something in her book, looks up and she's like, why do you have a picture of Elaine Brown on your wall? But other than that, I tried not to have that conversation at Spelman at all because I was worried about how people would receive me. There would be people who were like, what kind of gun do you own? I don't really like guns. I definitely do not want to risk my life for an ideology. So I tried not to. I mean, I didn't try to avoid it. It's just that there was no one who understood the way Meadow did. And so, one time Meadow and I were sitting in Sisters Chapel and this woman who was doing the Sunday service compared the Panthers to the KKK. And I was like, see, this is what I get for coming when it's non-convocation. So yeah, I didn't, and like my mother knows Geronimo's mother, who he went to Morehouse. I don't know if he's I think he is my class, but we would have never known each other. So there just wasn't a lot of, I joined Amnesty International at Spelman, and we were the only HBCU that had an Amnesty International chapter. But I did that probably because of my upbringing. And that's the fun thing to me about the book is that now that my editor said it ends with my graduation from Spelman, the unfortunate part is that at 2 a.m, I could be, tipsy or stoned, and I would still write everything down. We just came back from JR Crickets, and I was wearing this, and then she said this, and then so some of that will only be interesting to us. You know what I mean? My editor is going to be like, no one wants to hear about Atlanta in 1988. I'm like, yes, they do. There's a whole bunch of us. Are there
that's perspective. It's also nice to know that everybody's mom tries to introduce them to people that they think they should know, that you've never encountered ever. So yeah.
And you have to.
Yeah. Or get your number out.
Mara could have said to her dad, I'm not going to do it. Like, fine, send that little freshman over here.
Gretchen, are you still with us? Go ahead, take yourself off mute. There you go.
Here. Erica, thank you so much for this. I could listen to you talk all day.
Tell that to my teachers.
Well, and unfortunately, I was a little late. I was wondering, I don't know if you mentioned this, but what's the status of the TV show?
Oh, okay. Well, I wish I could tell you. So for anyone who doesn't know, Lawrence Fishburne's company, Cinema Gypsy, has a deal with ABC to produce a show that was going to be called Party Girl, but October, maybe last October, they informed me. I don't really have a whole lot of say so in the show. It's not. I'm not sure how Hollywood. I have an agreement with Disney that is they have my life rights, and so they can change my age. They can pretty much do whatever they want. So they had a showrunner who was announced in the press, but she's no longer the showrunner. So there's a new showrunner as of January, and she comes from Grownish. So in the beginning, I kind of thought when they talked to me about the show, it would be more like Young Sheldon, because I was 8 when I left the party. And one of the things that I had said to Mr. Fishburne in our brief phone conversation was, if you remember the first season of The Facts of Life, that's how I was raised if Mrs. Garrett had been a communist. And so they're kind of doing something different, probably trying to reach a freeform audience. So there's no pilot, there's no, it's just freeform has the right to have 10 episodes when they massage it. So I guess when things start shooting again, or they are shooting now, but right now it's still we have a different showrunner, and she seems like a very nice person. The only reason I even agreed to this is because a Spelman sister asked me, can I write and talk about your story? And I said, well, I'm writing this book, but if it helps you, you can do, let's talk. But now I'm like, I would love the opportunity for people to see how I saw Black Panthers. So the book is going to be for a certain age and above, my book, and it's my book. Whereas the show could be like fresh off the boat, where they're going to have their own take on it. So I could be 14 and know my father and be secretly Republican. They can pretty much do whatever. And I hope that they'll stick to whatever they found interesting about the story in the first place, because I don't want anything, if it's disrespectful to my family. A lot of stuff is funny about growing up in the Black Panther Party. The fact that the woman who raised us, Donna, she came to my birthday party when I was 50 in March. That she and her wife drove down from Oakland because I'm still her child. Like, I know other people may not understand that family dynamic, but that is who we are. It doesn't change the fact that the party doesn't exist anymore. So Donna said when she would take us there's an amusement park in California, in Alameda, called Great America. It's based on Warner Brothers, so all the characters like Tweety Bird, Sylvester, but Great America, so obviously there's going to be a lot of red, white, and blue. And Donna would take us to Great America. I don't know how she did it with 10 kids by herself. And on the way there, she would say, don't touch any shit that's red, white, and blue. These capitalists are not paying these workers. All right, kids, have fun. Everything in the amusement park is red, white, and blue. But it was the only one in Oakland. So, those are the stories that I hope make it to the show. And I hope that people have an opportunity. But I got really excited when I thought it would be closer to my age. So I don't know if you guys have seen this commercial, but there was an Eggo commercial with this little Black girl, and her brother takes her Eggo, and he's like, I don't see your name on it. And she's like, but bam, it's right. I saw this little girl and I was like, oh, I want her to play me. And then the showrunner was like, yeah, you're going to be 14. So I was like, I have no control. Unfortunately, I'm kind of a consultant, even though I'm supposed to be a producer, but we'll see. I want the chance for people to see the Panthers the way I did. It's not a political organization to me. I get it. My mom is still angry every day. She's has a nonprofit now called Open in the World. She builds businesses for people who are formerly incarcerated. She's the only Black woman developer in the Bay Area right now, about to build affordable housing to keep Black people in Oakland to try to hold the line. But if people could have like a way on Freeform to see the people I saw every day, the men who made us breakfast, the woman who took care of us in the dorm, Patsy, who would do my hair, and I'd be like, I want Afro puffs. And she's like, you don't have enough hair for Afro puffs, Erica. Just cornrow it, go to sleep. So I would love to be able to I hope that they will honor that part of why I'm even agreeable to the show. But like, I have no idea what it's called right now. But yeah, me and the mouse. I'm a Black Panther princess in a couple of ways.
Thank you so much.
What's the name of your mom's organization again?
Oakland and the World.
Oakland
Enterprises. Mm-hmm. Also, just I don't know who's on here who hasn't, but if you haven't read A Taste of Power, it will change your life. My mother's book is called A Taste of Power. She has another book called Condemnation of Little B about Michael Lewis. But her autobiography, you'll just be like, the way I read Octavia Butler when I finally got it.
Mm.
Is there another question?
Tiari, do you have a question?
I just had to unmute myself. First off, congratulations on your book, and congratulations also for having the courage to tell your story.
We've talked about that, haven't we?
We have, and it's this. I think this story about those of us who grew up as kids in the movement, the love you have for your family. You have a critical love. It's a love, but it's also critical. So it's not just hagiography. I think this is important to talk about the multiplicity of Black experiences and the way these different Black experiences even behave regionally. Because, I grew up in the South. The whole movement situation in the South was so different than out West. Every voice, I think, that adds to the way we understand who we are, how we are, and why we are how we are is extremely important. So I don't have so much as a question. It's just that I just want to congratulate you and say that I'm so proud to know you, and we are so proud to have you as our Spelman sister. That's all.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I wish writing were as easy as talking, but I think I told you this the last time we saw each other. I told my editor, well, I write like I talk, and you were like, he'll be fine. And then he said to me, yeah, we'll work it out. But, my initial notes were, Erica, please don't try to fit a whole story in one paragraph. You don't have to, but I write like I talk. I blah, 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 blah. Punchline.
Well, it's not that you write like you talk, it's that you write like you think. And that is what we call voice. And I think it's very important. Could you just give a few words of encouragement? I'm sure there is someone on this thread who has a story to tell and doesn't know where to start or what to do next. So could you just give some encouragement to our sisters and brothers out there that may be staring at a blank piece of paper?
Yes, and we probably talked about this too. But one of the things my mother said to me when I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and write a book. She kept saying, write a book. You'll feel better. It'll be therapeutic. The person that told her to write her book was Suzanne DePass. That's why I'm Erica Suzanne. And it did change my mother's life in so many ways. But also when she sees how the book impacts other people. But for the people who are not afraid, you could be afraid or stuck or whatever the reason is, but if you write down every event you can remember in your life as a list, not telling a story, every person you ever knew, and this might sound really boring, but it's the things that will jog your memory. There's so many things like, there's stories I probably didn't have in my diary, but I remember them so well. But, moving back to LA, I'm fairly close to the Beverly Center where this store used to be called Rexall. It's now like a CVS and a Target or something. And my mother and I were leaving it one day in 1979, 1980. And there was this little blonde girl outside who looked like Sarah Miller from Addams Family 2. Just adorable, Girl Scout. And she was like, hi, I'm selling Girl Scout cookies. Would you like to buy some Girl Scout cookies from the Girl Scouts of America? And my mom said, I don't believe in America. Go away. And I was like, so I'm not getting cookies? So seeing the Rexall, whatever it is now, reminded me of one of these stories, vignettes that I may not have put in my diary. So if you write down every person you know, it might spark something else, and then you'll sculpt away the things that aren't. Like, I'm trying to figure out if I really am going to name a bunch of people in certain things because it isn't their story. You know what I mean? Like, if you did drugs with me in 1988, that may not be something that you actually want to deal with right now. And also, it's my story. So even if I'm telling you, oh, I got high with someone who has famous parents or whatever, it's not my place to tell their story. But you still have to write down all of these connections, these events. Writing all of the list down is how I figured out that my mom and I lived in 11 places in 10 years. So we constantly moved in LA and Beverly Hills. Well, we stayed in Beverly Hills for high school. And then as soon as I was done, and shortly after that, she went to France. But the list will give you a place to start. The other thing is, if there's a reason that you're afraid to tell your story, write that reason down and then think of the worst thing. You know, my mom told me something the other day that John Huggins used to say, you can only die once. So you have to figure out if it's going to kill you. You know, I hate the idea that that people who don't like the Black Panther Party or people who don't like my mother might try to use the book like, look at this vapid little girl she raised who ended up on drugs and sexually assaulted and just so superficial. Or people who try to use it to disparage the party, or I'm embarrassed that I was raped because I still blame myself. I was hitchhiking, and even though I sort of knew the person, what if I hadn't done this? And I'm 50, and I still have this underlying, like, if you hadn't done this, if you hadn't, I didn't tell my husband. I mean, I was married to a Morehouse man for 20 years. I didn't tell him about being raped until we were together like 5 years. And it was something happened. I saw something on television. You know how you have day residue, but you let it go, or you think you do. But it was this weird Elvis movie with Mary Tyler Moore. And Elvis confronts these fake Black Panthers. So the movie kind of stuck out in my head, but a scene happens where she's followed by two men. And even though that's not what happened to me, it sparked something. So apparently I was just trying to scream in my sleep and scratching at my throat. And that is when I told my ex-husband. So there are things that you might be afraid of, but then you have to tell yourself, but I'm still here. I am going to name my rapist in my book, and I've never even told my mother his name. So there's certain parts of why you should tell it that if you're afraid, it's fine, but do it anyway. People are going to have judgment about the clothes I wore. Ask Samara, the hair was, I mean, this is not great, but COVID. But tell your story because it really might reach out to someone. When I finally told my mother about being raped, it was a hard conversation. She was really hurt and upset, and I was about to be married. But then 5 years after that, like in 2010 or something, 2005, I don't know, we went to Hawaii together for a girls' festival. And it was a festival of art and culture to raise funds and awareness because Hawaii has a horrible trafficking problem. Young girls and boys dressed as young girls are horribly trafficked. A lot of the tourists that will come from Australia and Japan to Hawaii to rent underage girls. So when we went to this event, my mother was the keynote, but one of the days I gave a talk about, being assaulted and figuring out survivor versus victim or both. And several people came up to me afterward and said, I'm going to tell my mother about her brother raping me, or I'm going to tell my husband about what happened to me and, or I'm going to go see a therapist. So when I saw how, and even when I've talked about it on Facebook, there have been people who message me later that say, I'm unfortunately relate, or I've talked about, I was on that booger sugar, and I'm not making a joke about it, but it's just that I've been sober since January of 1999. So cocaine isn't a part of this story in this part of my life, but it doesn't mean I don't have empathy. It's just I didn't go through NA, so I'm not going to give people a whole bunch of 12-step. Like I just really hunkered down. It was like I don't want to die. I mean, I hate to say this, but getting engaged was the catalyst for me to say you should get sober. If you're going to try to share your life with someone, don't die. But because I'd been raised in the party, I also didn't think of life as something that was for me. Your life is, we called Huey the servant. Your life is in service to others. So the idea of wanting or having something for me was like the biggest guilt trip. But I was like, get sober. So if people are afraid to tell their story, or afraid to even look at it, you can write something down, set it on fire, but just get it out. And in this day and age, you can videotape yourself with your phone throughout the day, but your story might have an impact that you don't even see until you tell it, if that makes sense.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Oh God.
We are very grateful for you coming here and spending time and telling us a bit of your story today. And I know that everybody that's here is anxiously anticipating the release of your book. So we will
Thank
look
you so much
forward.
for having me, Stephanie.
Well, thank you for coming and thank you for saying yes. And thank you for sharing in the way that you have. It's been a great time.
Well, I love Spelman and Morehouse. My brother went to Morehouse 2005, 6. And I'm grateful that Spelman exists. I'm grateful that Morehouse exists. And Spellhouse love is real. I don't care. I'm a hippie, whatever.
It really is. It really is. Without it, I don't think any of us would be the people we are today. It's shaped so much of who we are.
I totally agree.
So I just want to say thank you. And when you get that release date, for those of you who aren't connected with Erica on social media, I'll definitely share it with the class.
And I do have a page on Facebook, Black Panther Princess.
Okay.
Amazon says the book is coming out 8/15/21, but it's not. It'll be a little bit after that. But you can already, click something on Amazon if you put in Erica Suzanne Brown, Abram, I don't know. But yeah, I do have a Facebook page. I just don't have a lot of content on it, just pictures right now, but Black Panther Princess. And I appreciate you guys supporting it. And I think my mom's A Taste of Power, the filming of her movie starts next year.
Oh, wow. That book is also available on Amazon if you don't have it.
Mm-hmm. And it's available in Spanish and French.
Fantastic. Again, thank you, Erica.
Until
we see each other again, feel free to hang out with us for the rest of the weekend if you'd like to.
I'm here for the 48 hours.
All right. Thank you. Tammy, I'm going to put you back to you.
Bye, Samara. Love you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Erica.
Love you, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Of course,
you.
Eric.
Thank you. All right, guys. That was very
Wonderful.
powerful, very moving.
Hey, that was awesome.